Welcome back to War Weekly News. This week we have a Q&A about the upcoming penetration changes. Before we get into that, hit that subscribe button. I want to address some criticism that I got in my last video that I think is important to spread to everyone. One of my viewers commented about how I didn't express well enough that it is stated in the initial announcement about the penetration changes that these penetration changes aren't going to be for every gun. There's going to be a certain set of guns that will not be changed. I did, however, say this directly in my video. I read the little blip on the original announcement page that said that certain guns would not be affected by these changes. And here I'll reread exactly what they said. There are certain challenges involved in calculating the letter, and it is possible that for a certain portion of shells, the old armor penetration system will be provided. These shells represent a significant portion of shells available in game. For example, would be the L15A3/A5 and M728. So yeah, I read that last week, but perhaps I didn't make it clear enough. Perhaps people didn't grab onto it enough, and they only went with the existing numbers and assumed all guns. See, the issue here, why I didn't put too much emphasis on this, because they don't tell us which guns. They just say a significant portion, but we don't know what that's going to mean. I would hope that most World War II weapons wouldn't be effective, that we have really solid penetration data from post-war analysis, but they don't state a single thing about that. So I'm going to further on assume it is all guns, because I can't tell what ones aren't going to be effective. Now let's get on to this Q&A. First question, is this new system going to affect HESH shells? If yes, how? The answer is these changes will not apply to HE, HESH, or heat shells, which is kind of given in the title. I don't know why people assumed by HESH. I guess they assumed that HESH might also be buffed, but these changes aren't going to affect HESH, and I doubt HESH is going to be buffed back to what it used to be anytime soon. The second question is asking about if they're going to update their Ricochet system, and bringing up that sometimes large shells ricochet off light vehicles, and the answer was explaining how their Ricochet system works, but they end it with, no, we don't plan to update the Ricochet system. Question 3 was asking, what about the hardness of materials used in a shell? All kinds of different materials are made with a varying degree of hardness throughout time. Guys replied with, material hardness will not be taken into account in caliber type projectiles since the parameter could be really different. Depending on the time of production, hardness could vary greatly for the same round type, and choosing specific values would not be accurate. However, hardness destiny of the core of such rounds as APFSDS will be taken into account. This one really bugs me a lot. The hardness of a shell, I'm pretty sure, does heavily affect the penetration ability. And Gaijin's answer just heavily dodges the whole question, saying, well, you know, sometimes shells would be made different hardness values, but like I'm pretty sure different nations would make their shells to a harder degree. Like if you make the shell too hard, I'm pretty sure it would just shatter if it hit too heavy a metal. But if you make it not as hard, it can still embed itself. It's all science stuff. And I'm not an artillery shell expert or whatever, but I'm pretty sure this is actually a pretty big deal. Many people have brought it up. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd like to see Gaijin throw out some documents saying I'm totally wrong and it was just a fluke that sometimes shells were harder than others. I heavily doubt it, but let's get on to the other questions. Are there plans to change the penetration system currently? Shells are 1 pixel wide in game, so they can go through tiny armor gaps. For example, the 152mm shell can fit in a 10-meter hole. And the answer was, that's a complex, non-trivial task. We studied possible variants several times, and at the moment we haven't found one that meets all the requirements. Perhaps it will come back in the future. At the moment, we use the method that is most widely used in games. Now, I feel this answer is much less disingenuous, as they kind of like gave a degree that they've looked at the issue before and just haven't come to a conclusion that they like. The issue, it does bug me a lot, taking a KV-2 and shooting to just a tiny, like a turret ring. I hope one day this actually is resolved. It would heavily change a lot of aspects of the game. Not too much, but it would change a lot of them. Certain tanks that have a low battery because they have so many tiny weak spots would all of a sudden not have those tiny weak spots and have to be up-tiered. The Carnarvon, I think, is a good one. But at least Gaijin is looking at the issue. Question after that is, will documented sources contradicting the results of the formula be discarded even if there is no contradiction with other documents? Or could there be exceptions in the system? I know you mentioned APDS, was wondering if other shells might also be excluded in some cases. This is kind of in relation to the thing that I brought up in the beginning of the video, and this is Gaijin's answer, which doesn't install a lot of confidence to me in the whole new system. Exceptions are rare cases where no other method allows us to gather the correct data about the round. Differences of the penetration data in different sources are not enough to add a round to the exception list, when the purposes of the method is to exclude incoherencies in the data from various sources. Otherwise, penetration values would be constantly changed. See, if you take note in that, nowhere do they state that, oh yeah, that would be the majority of World War II era guns or stuff. They just say exceptions are rare cases. Like, is this are we actually going to go and change all the rounds? Is the Tiger II 105 really gonna have 170 millimeter penetration at 7.0 stock? Are we seriously doing this? Next question was, have you any plans to improve heat ricochet? In many cases, heat projectiles should not ricochet, but either break or detonate. Many heat shells are too fragile to stay intact after ricochet. Gaijin's reply was, heat rounds can ricochet at high angles of impact. The specific angle depends on the fuse design. Of course, a round can be destroyed after impact, and this is implemented in our game. After ricochet, a round loses its stability and can self-detonate. Here is the data on the V15 fuse for heat rounds. As you can see, the angle is 0 to 70 degrees, and then there's a data chart on the V15 fuse performance, and it indeed says sensitivity angles degrees 0 to 70. I looked up the V15 fuse, and the closest I got to heat round was some Soviet round I think that T-62 uses. I feel the answer on this one is kind of dodging the question. Essentially said, hey, heat shells do sometimes ricochet, instead of approaching this dude is talking about saying that it's happening too often at angles that shouldn't. I don't know. I'd have to look into the issue more to see if this is proper, but it does sound like a little bit like it's trying to dodge the question. Question after that was asking how about APHEBC, a shell that some Russian guns use. Is it going to be the same as APBC? APCBC now, it has had weird characteristics for years. And the answer is that the slope effects for those rounds will also be implemented as if they were APBC shells. The next question is another question that reinforces the concept that yes, just about every shell is going to get these effects. Japanese tank guns' performance took a hit with the new system. What have you planned in regards? And the answer is BR changes will be made where they are required. This affects all nations, not just Japanese. Question after that was, how is penetration calculated? What are the mechanics for rounds with different cap shapes? The answer is cap shape affects armor penetration at specific angles, and this is taken into account in the slope effect sheet. To get penetration values at the specific angle, you should divide armor thickness by the slope value of the required angle. This is another one of the answers I can't really put much thought onto because I don't really know how to do ballistic calculations on all that stuff, and I'm not sure exactly what caps do. Besides, I know that cap rounds typically have more shrapnel than non-cap rounds, ergo they're better at destroying enemy tanks. So I'm just going to have to take Gaijin's word on this one. The next question is asking if these new penetration charts are going to affect low-caliber aircraft weapons, and the answer is no, they're not going to affect low-caliber MGs for the moment. Now, the issue I'm holding with Gaijin here is what do they mean by high caliber and low caliber? Where do we draw the line? Is it a 30mm cannon low caliber? Is a 37mm cannon high caliber? Like, I really want to know the difference on these because it could mean a lot in the end. But they still have refused to throw these out. Maybe there's like a universal definition for low caliber and high caliber that maybe I should look up. But I wish Gaijin would clarify a bit more. They're being very loose with the terms that they're using. They're not telling us exactly what guns they're not going to affect besides the two examples that they showed us. And they're not telling us exactly what they mean by high caliber and low caliber. Question after that is, rounds of the same type and caliber may have different penetration. Will this affect calculation? The answer is, if these rounds have different parameters affecting penetration, mass, velocity, HE, mass, etc., this will affect the calculation results. Next question asked if they could show us the exact formula that they used to calculate all this stuff. Gaijin's response was, in the future, the exact characteristics of the rounds will be shown on the War Thunder Wiki directory for the game in articles specifically for guns. Final question is, Damar's formula does not take explosive mass into account, but using the calculator, one noticed that final penetration value is not linear in reference to explosive mass. Are these some kind of hidden parameters? Gaijin's reply was, indeed, Damar's formula does not take explosive mass into account. That is why we use data from AAG that allow us to formulate penetration value reductions depending on filling coefficients, and add explosive mass as one of the coefficients to the formula. Taking explosives into account allows us to calculate penetration values more accurately. Rounds with high filling coefficient have lower penetration values. The exact values are not hidden. You can see them below, and the table that they show is actually to the side of the question. Whatever. Right under that, there are two links, one to new APFSDS penetration values calculated with the Lance orbit formula, and the other is for APCR and HVAP core data to be calculated, but it doesn't show the penetration values, just the weight of the cores. But somebody did calculate them themselves. We'll get into that in just a second. I want to first go into the comments of this, as there's administrators handing out quite a few interesting answers. Top comment asking, what's the point of all of this? The administrator replies with saying, essentially that it's easier to understand. Then he goes on to a long diatribe about why it's easier and all that stuff, which I don't want to read. So the next one was somebody scoffing at the remark about how they're not taking shell material hardness into account. A minister replied saying metallurgy is a complicated subject is an understatement. We've seen discrepancy between nations, testing facilities, shell factories, date of shell fabrication. We would have to make a choice. Do we pick the weakest or the strongest shell? Date of production, number of shells produced. Once we pick one shell data, how could we get the players to agree that this specific choice? Players need a fair system, and we believe the solution, of course, nothing is written in stone, as the system may evolve over time. Which I could say as a reply to that is you pick the shell that functions best with the tank, as in keeps it at a BR that it is competitive at. If a tank starts overperforming, maybe nerf the shell with a weaker shell, or if it's underperforming, give it a stronger shell, because apparently it used all these shells that had slight differences. It could be a way for soft nerf or buff. And if you have the data that back it up, people will have to believe it. Doesn't matter if they are upset or whatever. Another commenter said, people were asking for a fix for literally everything else than APHE, as the APHE was pretty much balanced already, except for APHE BC, with its odd angled values. Going purely on a formula is far from even attempting for realism. Particle tests exist for a reason, and the data should be respected. And a minister replies with, particle testing is done under different conditions, especially during pre-World War II. There was no reason to unify standards between countries, which means even if we take original sources literally, the shell performance will vary. What will you do if two accurate sources contradict each other? Regular problem. The problematics go much deeper. We have 1,200 vehicles in the game for CCA 10 countries. We need to unify the standard if we're going to deliver accurate ballistic results. I'd feel that a more realistic solution to this would be using the ballistic results that fit to where you want to place the vehicle on the tree, kind of like I had said with shell hardness. If a tank's doing too well, look to ballistic results that have it penetrating less. Although another thing is, I don't know what CCA stands for. Urban Dictionary says it's an acronym for cutest couple alive, or a slang for one night stand. So I don't think that's accurate here. It might be a typo. But if you were to count every single country that has at least one vehicle in game, there's actually 15 of them. So yeah, just nitpick your argument. Get on my level. The last comment I saw a minister reply to, and probably the most important, was someone asking, when are these new penetration stats supposed to be implemented? And the administrator replied with, it should happen before 1.87, which doesn't have a date on it, but my feeling is that we're going to get this implemented before devlogs for 1.87 start coming, and 1.87 devlogs are likely to start happening very soon. I believe last year for this season's patch, the devlogs started what was last Friday. My feeling is these new results are going to be coming sometime next week or this week, whenever you're reading this. This is being made on Sunday, so take that to adjust your time. Well, let's get back to those links that guys are showing around. So first off, the new penetration values for APFSDS using the Lands Ornament formula. The first thing you'll probably notice is that generally it's a nerf to APFSDS. At the very least, at flat penetration, it seems that has overall the type of round has lost a few meters of penetration. However, at further ranges and at different angles, some rounds have actually gained some penetration. The second thing you might notice is that the French 120mm shell is now overall the best round in the game, beating DM33 in every range at every angle, which disappoints me because I really liked having the tank with the best round in the game be each fan, because I'm a filthy weeb. The third thing you'll probably notice is that M774 has gotten hit by the nerf bat as well, at flat penetration losing about 50 meters of penetration. However, at 60-degree angles, gained a little bit of penetration, but at 30-degree angles, you've lost penetration. This has led to a lot of people suspecting that perhaps Gaijin is planning on adding M883 to the game, as they believe they said a while ago that they do have the stats for the round in the files, they just haven't found a reason for the Abrams to have it. Now with M774 getting nerfed, perhaps there's a reason to add it to the tank. Now the other link led to a chart of APCR or HVAP core data, so the diameter of the core and the weight of the core for a bunch of rounds. I've noticed that they're only Russian, German, and American HVAP rounds, but someone took their time and put these into the calculator that Gaijin let us use, and the results very interesting. Overall, not too many intense changes. For Germany, the biggest changes would be the 4.7 Pentagonot 40 gaining 30 millimeters of penetration, going from 103 to 133 millimeters. 50 millimeter Pentagonot 40 losing 15 millimeters of penetration. However, KWK 24 gained 14 millimeters of penetration, which isn't much. And finally, 10.5 Pentagonot 40 gained 25 millimeters of penetration, making it have up to 301 millimeters of penetration. Generally nothing too intensive, and having a higher or lower penetration, if the bounce rate of APCR isn't changed, these won't really matter because people still don't use it, regardless of how high its penetration rate is. Things were a bit more crazy for the Americans. 76mm M93 lost 34 millimeters of penetration. 90mm M332 gained 14 millimeters of penetration. 90mm T44 gained 44 millimeters of penetration, changing it from 270 millimeters of penetration to 314. And 120mm T17E1 gained 81 millimeters of penetration, making the round go up from 324 to 405 millimeters of penetration. Now, if you don't recognize what this round is, I don't blame you. No one ever uses APCR. It is the round on the T34 heavy tank, which currently sits at 6.7. Now, if they don't change the bounce rate of APCR, I could see this tank maybe still sitting at 6.7, maybe going up to 7.0. But if they do change the bounce rate of APCR to make it bounce less and have the shell be more used, then this is going to be a king tiger cracker. If you remember when we were just going over APFSDS rounds, not many of them go over 400 after these changes are put into place. Now you might be thinking, well, this just proves that Gaijin's calculations are trash and we should throw them out. However, people have complained about T17E1 in the past not pulling up the documents. According to official secret documents, the T17E1 round should be able to penetrate 393.7 millimeters at 0 degrees at 900 meters. This is what the official documents say. Gaijin never implemented these changes, even though the bug report was sent. What these documents are saying is the new penetration rates are actually realistic. I don't know. My mind has been blown. The tank will definitely be up-tiered. Anyways, let's carry on to the Soviet HVAP. Not as many drastic changes like the other nations. The 85mm BR365P will be gaining 47 millimeters of penetration, bringing it up to 227 millimeters. But the 100mm BR412P will lose 26 millimeters of penetration, although that doesn't really matter because nobody uses it anyways, because nobody uses APCR because it always bounces on everything. In more minor news, it was confirmed by Sim 1080p that the H64A and Ka50 will not be added in 1.87. I didn't say anything that would be added in 1.87, just that those will definitely not be added. In the terms of the changelog, nothing very exciting happened except for the SIDAM 25 lost its lead indicator, as historically the vehicle didn't have its own radar. If I recall correctly, I saw this back when Italian tanks were being added. SIDAM 25s were to act in a pack, and there would be one vehicle that actually had radar, it didn't have guns on it, and that radar vehicle would assist the SIDAMs. And finally, you've may have seen this image floating around of a ME262B pack on the Gaijin store. This is fictitious. I can tell you this because the actual image that they're showing here can easily be found on Google Images. It's not that hard to fake this kind of stuff. You just press F12 and it brings up a little console and you can like mess with web pages. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you have any comments or concerns, hit me up down below or my Discord. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, don't hit the button. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. I make news videos every Sunday. I make random videos throughout the week, and I like to stream on Saturdays. I've changed it now. Hit that bell icon to be notified anytime I upload anything. I hope you had a great day.